I'm Diane Reese, and I'm one of the project officers for the Gulf of Mexico Division. This presentation is focused on the EPA Gulf of Mexico Division's funding opportunity titled Healthy and Resilient Gulf of Mexico 2023 Request for Applications, which has been funded using Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, commonly known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or Bill. From here forward, I will refer to this only as the RFA. The purpose of this presentation is to assist potential applicants to develop the best application they can. This presentation will highlight some information from the RFA and provide a strategy for getting started. This presentation should not be used in place of reading or following the instructions in the RFA, as this is not meant to be an all-encompassing presentation and only outlines portions of the RFA. This presentation will touch on the items listed here: EPA Gulf of Mexico Division, what to know about this RFA, eligible locations, getting started, project narrative and tips, developing your budget table, evaluation criteria, submitting your application, the selection process, helpful resources, and questions. So what is the EPA Gulf of Mexico Division? GMD is one of EPA's great water body programs and is focused on the protection and restoration of the health and productivity of the Gulf of Mexico. GMD activities are centered around voluntary, partner-driven projects. All projects must take place in one of the geographic categories identified in the RFA and within the Gulf of Mexico watershed. The link to GMD's webpage is epa.gov/Gulf of Mexico. On this page, you can find a link to the story map pictured here on this slide and find information on previously funded projects. So what to know about this RFA? This RFA seeks to fund project activities in disadvantaged communities, and that also supports GMD's objectives for disadvantaged communities in Section 1A2 of the RFA. Projects must also have activities that support at least one of GMD's 4 priority areas. They are 1. Water quality improvement, 2. Protect, enhance, or restore habitat, 3. Environmental education, or 4. Strengthen community resilience. See Section 1B of the RFA for additional information. Applications must identify the primary priority area for the application, and it must be either 1, 2, or 4. Priority Area 3 for environmental education may be included in any project but may not be the primary focus of the application. What's new in this RFA? It's the requirement for the applicant to establish a partnership prior to applying. The partnership must consist of the applicant, who is responsible for applying and managing the grant, and at least 4 additional partners who will be subrecipients of the applicant. The application must contain a letter of commitment from every partner that establishes the relationship between the applicant and subrecipient. For more information, see Section 3B of the RFA. EPA expects to fund 5 projects up to $6 million each, for a total of $30 million. At least 50% of the budget should be dedicated to subaward and subrecipient projects, with no more than 25% dedicated to Priority Area 3 for environmental education. All projects and project activities must be located in disadvantaged communities. Eligible locations are also dependent on the priority area of the application. If the primary priority area for the application is number 1, water quality improvement, or number 2, protecting, enhancing, or restoring habitat, projects may be located anywhere in the Gulf states of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, and in the eligible counties in Florida that drain to the Gulf of Mexico. If the primary focus is number 4, strengthening community resilience, projects must be located in the eligible Gulf coastal counties. See Appendix D for the list of eligible coastal counties and Florida counties. Since Priority Area 3 for environmental education can be a part of any project but not the primary focus, eligible project locations are the same as the primary focus. In other words, If community resilience is the focus, education projects must also be located in the eligible Gulf coastal counties. So where should you start? First, read the RFA and ensure your project and your eventual application meet the requirements in the RFA. The RFA contains vital information that can improve scoring and quality of applications. Next, there are several items to confirm for your organization prior to starting your application. First, confirm that your organization is eligible. The list of eligible entities can be found in Section 3A of the RFA. Also, confirm that your organization has a current registration with the System for Award Management at SAM.gov, a unique entity identifier, and is registered in grants.gov. This is extremely important since obtaining a UEI could take more than 30 days. Not obtaining these in time is not an allowable reason for a late application to be accepted, so please double check this as soon as possible. Plan your project. When developing your project idea, keep the following in mind. The project must meet the priorities of the funding opportunity for which you apply. The priorities can be found in sections 1A2 and 1B of the RFA. Any projects that do not will be rejected. Your project must state how it is relevant to the Gulf of Mexico and the EPA Strategic Plan goals. EPA Strategic Plan linkage information can be found in section 1C1. As you are planning your project, please be sure to consider the potential outputs and outcomes you expect from your subrecipients and how those will be identified in your application. Writing the project narrative. After you've worked to develop the project and project details, you are ready to write your project narrative. To approach this, utilize the project narrative format found in Appendix C of the RFA. This provides a format for the summary information page and the project work plan. We suggest you use this format to ensure you cover everything that will be evaluated in Section 5A. Be sure to review the RFA for the full project narrative format and any cautionary information. As a side note, beyond the project narrative, there are other forms and documents required, including the budget tables shown on the next slide, and letters of commitment from partners. Please see Section 4B of the RFA for more information on these items. Tips to keep in mind when writing the project narrative are: use succinct, meaningful sentences. Please do not include unnecessary or irrelevant information not requested in the contents of submission section, including the project narrative. Readability. Font should be no smaller than Calibri 11 point and margin should not be smaller than 1 inch. The project narrative should be a maximum of 12 pages. This includes 1 page for summary information and a project work plan of up to 11 pages. Please note any excess pages will not be reviewed. Maps should be included at the end of the document and will not be counted against the 12-page limit for the project narrative. The project narrative environmental results section should adequately describe what can be anticipated from the project. Programmatic capability. This section should describe your organizational knowledge and experience in working with disadvantaged communities. The budget narrative should only include information not easily understandable in budget table or that requires additional information for a budget category. Examples are listed in Appendix C under Budget Narrative, but include a description of the roles and responsibilities of personnel, description of what supplies will be used for, description of why the purchase of equipment is preferable to rental, provide contract details such as whether it will be sole sourced or competed and why that choice was made, and a description of activities of subawardee. Describe each item in sufficient detail for EPA to determine cost effectiveness, reasonableness, and allowability of cost. Cost effectiveness will consider the organizational overhead or indirect cost and direct cost versus anticipated results. Just as a reminder, the budget narrative together with the budget table described on the next slide will be evaluated under the budget evaluation criteria found in Section 5A. So if you have a budget table but no narrative to explain items that are difficult to understand, you may be evaluated less favorably. Developing a budget table. On GMD's webpage, there is a link to a recommended budget table template that is pictured on this slide. Utilizing this template in conjunction with the budget narrative will ensure the application has all of the information needed to evaluate the budget proposed for the project. This budget table provides more detail on the cost identified on the SF424A. The budget object class category amounts listed on your SF424A must match the budget object class category totals on your detailed budget table. For more information on developing your budget, please see EPA's Budget Development Guidance at epa.gov//files/2019-05//applicant-budget-development-guidance.pdf. Requested funding should be in alignment with the anticipated results, meaning an applicant should not request the maximum amount just because the maximum amount is available. As said on the previous slide, there are likely several categories in the budget table that you should include more detailed information for so they can be evaluated as necessary for the project. Please be sure to include that information in the budget narrative section of the project work plan, or this section may be reviewed less favorably. Now that your project narrative and project budget are complete, look at the evaluation criteria in Section 5A. For each evaluation criterion, compare your project narrative and project budget to the corresponding section. Be sure that there is a response for each identified evaluation criterion, and what you've included in your project narrative and budget is sufficient information to support good evaluation for each criterion. Under the Past Performance section, if your organization has never received a grant or an assistance agreement, please state that to receive half the points. If you skip or fail to provide any information for any evaluation criterion, you will get a 0 for that section. The table on this slide shows the point value of each evaluation section. I am going to say this again. It is very important that you read the criteria identified in Section 5A and provide sufficient detail in the narrative and budget for every item to be evaluated. Submitting your application. Refer to Section 4B of the RFA for detailed instructions for each required document listed on this slide. The required application documents are the SF424, Application for Federal Assistance, the SF424A for the budget information, EPA Form 5700-54s for key contacts for the project, EPA Form 4700-4, which is the pre-award compliance review, the project narrative, which includes a summary information page, work plan, detailed budget narrative and maps, the budget table, and resumes or CVs of principal investigators and critical staff. The negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, if applicable. Letters of commitment from at least 4 partners are required with this application. Letters of support from non-partners who can substantiate community involvement are recommended. There is an exception on the negotiated indirect cost rate agreement. This is only required if you have a federally negotiated indirect cost rate. If you are not requesting this, and you are requesting the 10% federal de minimis, you do not have to submit this supporting document.
Applications are due as stated in the RFA on Thursday, April 4, 2024. EPA first conducts a threshold eligibility review, which should be completed by April 12, 2024, where each application is evaluated to make sure it's eligible. The threshold eligibility criteria can be found in Section 3D. You will be notified if your application is deemed ineligible. If deemed ineligible, it will not proceed to merit review. EPA merit review committees will then score and rank all eligible applications. This should be completed by the end of May 2024. In early July 2024, EPA will notify those applicants selected for tentative awards. Unsuccessful applicants will also be notified at that time. Selected applicants are expected to submit a full funding package to the EPA GMD's office by September 2024, which includes all revisions and modifications. After internal review, it will be submitted to the Regional Grants Office for additional review and final award. Grant awards are expected around November 2024, and then projects may proceed.
Helpful resources. On this slide, you will find 2 links to additional helpful resources. The first is to GMD's Gulf of Mexico website, where you can find a link to the Healthy and Resilient Gulf of Mexico 2023 RFA webpage. On that webpage, you can find links to the RFA itself, the question and answers, this presentation, a common errors document for assistance in filling out forms, and other helpful links, including assistance in developing a budget. The second link is to epa.gov/grants, which is the EPA's grants webpage. This webpage provides additional resources for EPA grant applicants and recipients, including multiple trainings. Thank you for attending this webinar. GMD hopes it will be helpful as you begin planning your project. If you still have questions after listening to this presentation, reading the RFA, and reviewing both the Q&A and common errors documents, please email us at gmp-rfp@epa.gov. Thank you very much and have a great day.